Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. WRAL PolitiFact reporter Paul Spey has a really unique job. He's our resident specialist on misinformation, and he spends a lot of time parsing claims made by politicians to verify their accuracy. His PolitiFact segments regularly appear on our airwaves and online, and he joins us today to break down the year in misinformation. Paul, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Last time we did this, a year ago, we were coming off the midterm elections. Campaign ads seemed to be everywhere. But this year, the most popular fact checks have been a little bit more varied. What trends did you see?
Right. Without a midterm or general election this year, we did not check as many television ads. I mean, that really dominated last year. This year, we checked several email newsletters, fundraising emails from politicians that ended up at the top of the chart for us. And then another thing we saw was unexpected news, whether in politics or in weather in this year's case, also jumped to the top. So those are the two themes I saw this year.
Now, this year's legislative session was chock full of action, and you had claims from both sides of the aisle, including two that were somewhat intertwined. Tell us about that.
Right. Let's start with State Representative Tricia Cotham out of Mecklenburg County. She made national news earlier this year when she decided to switch parties. She was a longtime Democrat, and then surprisingly, seemingly out of nowhere in April, she switched to the Republican Party. And this had huge political ramifications. And here's why. The Democratic Party was with their members, with Cotham on their side, could uphold Roy Cooper's veto. So if Republicans wanted to push through some legislation, Cooper could veto it, and then they had enough votes to stop Republicans from overriding Cooper. When Cotham switched, that gave Republicans the exact number that they needed to pass whatever they wanted on abortion, taxes, education, anything, you name it, and they did. They have since then. And so with all this attention on Cotham back in April, people were wondering, well, why? Why did she switch? You know, her mom is a Democratic member of the Mecklenburg County Commission. You know, she comes from a long line of Democrats, and she had served previously from 2007 to 2016 and even made national news for her impassioned speech about abortion rights. And so what in the world happened? Everyone was wondering. So she comes out at this press conference on April 5th, I believe it was, and says that it was the Democrats who pushed her out by being abusive, by bullying her, by being controlling. And we looked into some of those claims. There's a headline we have out there, checking 5 of Cotham's claims about why she left. I'm paraphrasing. And we looked into her claim that Roy Cooper wanted to pick her seat on the House floor. Well, he doesn't control the seating chart on the House floor. The Republicans do because they're in the majority. And we found no evidence that he even attempted to pick where she sat. She claimed that Minority Leader Robert Reeves never spoke to her after she was elected. He disputed that. He showed us images of texts on his phone between him and her where they were really they appeared to be friendly. According to these images, they exchanged emojis, memes. She updated him when she would and wouldn't be at the legislature. It even showed him inviting her out to dinner. And then just a third out of the 5, she claimed that Reeves called on her to resign or face a primary challenge during her press conference. And that was a distortion of a press release that he put out. You know, Republicans were able to loosen gun laws one day when Cotham and 2 other Democrats weren't there. And Reeves put out this statement saying that if voters don't like the result of that day's vote, then they should get out and participate in the primaries and the general election when legislators are up for election. And Cotham insinuated that her name and that other people's names were in that statement. They were not. Reeves' statement didn't mention anybody by name. Now, it could be seen as a shot across the bow, if you will, but that claim was certainly exaggerated. And so that particular fact check of several of her statements about why she left got a lot of interest.
Now, her defection over to the GOP led to more claims that you had to check on the Democratic side, right?
Right. So after she left, everyone was waiting to see, like, how will this play out? And about a month later, Republicans unveiled their plan to enact new abortion laws in North Carolina. At the time, most abortions were banned after the 20th week of pregnancy. Republicans introduced a bill, I should say, to restrict it after the 12th week of pregnancy, with some exceptions. And there was some time between the time they introduced this bill and the time they voted on it and passed it. And quickly, Governor Cooper, Democratic Governor Roy Cooper, came out and put out press releases and a video statement where he called out legislators by name, four legislators by name, and said, these four made promises to protect women's reproductive health, and suggested that if they supported this new abortion law that they would be flip-flopping. Well, we looked into their previous statements on the campaign trail and otherwise, and found that he was right in three of the cases. But with one legislator from out on the coast, he exaggerated his position. And so that got some interest too, because people wanted to know, hey, are these guys flip-flopping or not? Ultimately, we rated that half true.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear about some of the more outrageous claims examined by PolitiFact reporter Paul Spey. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL PolitiFact reporter Paul Spey about the most popular North Carolina fact checks of 2023. Paul, in addition to the usual political claims, readers and viewers were also hooked by a few unusual fact checks. There was weather and there was even doctored images. Tell us about some of those.
Interesting use of the word hooked there. I don't know if you're trying to be punny, but yes, one of the top fact checks of the year was also about whether or not a great white shark ended up beached on the shores of the Outer Banks. On social media, there are a lot of images of sharks in funny places. This one looked more real, and so it gained a lot of traction on Facebook, and to the point where it was flagged by Facebook. Now, PolitiFact partners with Meta, meaning that they flag suspicious claims on Facebook and Instagram, and they told us to look into it. And so we did, and in this particular case, it turned out that no great white shark had washed up on the beaches of Kill Devil Hills, which is supposedly where it was. We reached out to the police there. They said they weren't aware of any. We reached out to misinformation experts who said, that photo looks doctored. That looks like it may have even been AI. And lastly, we even reached out to shark trackers who said, we're not aware. We didn't lose any great white shark. So that one turned out to be false, but got a lot of interest. And then another, this one's a little sadder because in July, there were at least 16 people who were injured by a tornado that sort of ripped through Rocky Mount in eastern North Carolina and damaged lots of homes and businesses. And one of the businesses was Pfizer. It's a Pfizer distribution facility, and people may or may not know Pfizer makes vaccines and other pharmaceutical products. And there was a post on Instagram this time that suggested that the tornado was somehow concocted intentionally so that the company could get a big insurance payout. Now, how someone even came up with that is sort of beyond me, but we took it seriously, and we looked into it and looked into whether or not any tornado-making machines had ever even been patented. And believe it or not, there were a couple of attempts, but nothing to the scale that could create and sustain a twister like the one that ripped through Rocky Mount. So A, there's no evidence for it, and B, we haven't even seen technology even capable of doing that.
Now, your work is affiliated with PolitiFact. It's a national organization. Can you walk us through your process? What do you look for in claims, and how do you go about verifying them? Tell us about that.
Sure. I mentioned our partnership with Meta, where they flag things for PolitiFact, and other fact-checking organizations are free to go in and fact-check suspicious claims on their platforms. But otherwise, we have reporters based in Washington, D.C., and Tampa, Florida, where PolitiFact's headquarters is, and then various partner states, including North Carolina, Wisconsin, I believe New York, and some others. And reporters are constantly listening to, political speeches, press conferences, watching ads on TV and things like that, and even monitoring social media, politicians' social media, to see what's out there, to see, is there something gaining traction that's misleading about a particular candidate or a particular topic, something like that. And when we do find one of those, we always go through the same process. Reach out to the person who's making this claim and say, hey, what's your evidence for this? And then we do our own research and we use credible sources, official sources, for medicine, it's doctors, it's physicians, it's and the CDC, and for legal stuff, we go straight to the legal documents, and at the end of it, we review what we have and write it up, and then editors vote on it. It's a little bit of a democratic process. 3 editors are presented what the reporter found, and they get to vote on a rating on the Truthometer, which has 6 ratings ranging from true to pants on fire, which is a claim that's not only false but ridiculous. And so we do the same thing every time to try to ensure consistency and try to make sure we're treating everyone fairly.
Now, you've been doing this for a while now. What is something you've come to learn in the role, either as a reporter or just as a consumer of information?
2 things come to mind. One is that, for the most part, politicians aren't afraid of fact checkers. When they say something, even if it's misleading, they often don't care whether or not we fact check it and find them to be wrong. That's not the point. Their point is not always to be truthful. It's to get a message out and have that message resonating with voters when they go to the ballot box. So that's something to keep in mind, is that the people who are trying to sway you one way or another are not always trying to be truthful. They're trying to persuade you. And the second is, some politicians take this more seriously than others. I will give a quick anecdote. One of the most interesting calls I ever got was when I fact-checked whether or not someone flip-flopped. And the person involved said offhand, like, I think I would rather be seen as someone who didn't tell the truth than as someone who flip-flopped. And that brings me to our flipometer. We have this thing called the flipometer, just like the truthometer, where we check to see if someone's done, a small flop or a full flip-flop on an issue. And so I thought that was interesting that in that particular case, they were like, please give us a false. Don't give us a flip-flop, because people, your politicians can be seen as liars. They're willing to accept that. But man, they do not want to be seen as people who waffle.
Now, we've got an election coming up in 2024. What are you going to be watching for?
Right. And so here in North Carolina, there's a presidential election. There's a governor's race. The seat's open. Governor Cooper is termed out. He can't run again. And so we'll be watching that. We'll be watching legislative races. We'll be watching congressional races. And then what's big this coming year is not just the races, but the nature of the ads. We've all seen plenty of misleading ads that include doctored images or fake voices. Well, artificial intelligence is taking this stuff to a new level, and we've covered that here at WRAL with a story we did a couple months ago about how AI is advancing to the point where it can create images, it can recreate someone's voice in a way that people cannot detect that it's fake. And so we'll be looking to see, are people getting robocalls that sound like a candidate but are not? Are people getting flyers in their mail with faked photos? And what did the video ads look like on television? So that'll be something we're watching this year. It's fascinating but scary at the same time.
What advice do you have for viewers and listeners and readers going into the election as they see these ads?
I would say that in many cases, claims being made in political ads are at least slightly exaggerated. So if you see something that catches your eye, look it up. If it matters to you, Google it and see what's out there. Oftentimes, PolitiFact or other credible fact-checking organizations like factcheck.org, they do a good job. Snopes.com, they do a good job. Washington Post, New York Times, all these places, if it's a big enough claim, especially in the presidential race, someone will have done something at some point. I can almost promise you. And so don't take these ads at their word. At least do a double check and see, is that claim as accurate as they portray? Oftentimes, it's at least slightly exaggerated. So it's just 2 minutes of your time Googling something on your phone or your computer is worth it.
All good advice. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Paul Spey for his roundup of some of the year's most popular North Carolina fact checks. Go to the PolitiFact section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.